So the big breakout is over. Now that all the fighters we expected already arrived into this big battle, what's going to come next? Slowly from the deeps, a new breed of fighters arrive. Expect for the unexpected. This is the rising tide. Welcome back to the Xuan character reviews. So, a fresh and brand new generation of fighters begin, and the first representative of this is Kuya. So I wasn't really expecting this newcomer. I thought the new boss was going to come next, so Kuya really took me by surprise. The phrase "like a bucket of cold water" applies here to me. He was not only not the character I was expecting, but I was turned back by his design. Fortunately, for several reasons, he was not as bad as I thought he would be in the end. So let's begin. Kuya is a Chinese master of the sword. Kuya is the second sword user in this game after Jack, but he brings a different style of fencing as he uses a more classic Asian sword rather than an European sword like the one of Jack. With a first glance at his design, we have yet another different body type in this game to break a little the monotony, as Kuya is actually tall and pretty slender. He looks at first glance like a stock intellectual anime guy. He is very serious and he is wearing glasses. Otherwise he has blue hair which is kind of medium length, so as it's not really that short, and he even has a long ponytail. And about the clothes, Kuya dons an exquisite blue uniform with cuts that can be described as a haute couture and remind us of the old French captains. So he has a blue coat with big lapels, white silk shirt underneath. At his waist height we have some pockets and locks. The shirt is long so it protrudes under the coat, which is a tailcoat, so on his back you have something to balance out the long shirt. He has a golden chain hanging, blue pants with this sort of chaps, and white shoes, as well as white gloves. So Kuya looks like in the middle ground between a French captain, an intellectual Asian student, and an old-fashioned butler. And well, it looks like Asian people, mainly the Japanese, but the XDZW designers too, because they are too inspired by the Japanese, seem to have some fascination with the French, or at least with the fashion. We have seen this in anime, and well, many cases actually, and I can't even help feeling Kuya looks like a big anime cliché. So does he fit with the rest of the roster? In matters of design, his fashion style is really different, and he doesn't look much like a believable fighter. On the other hand, people have said this character is like a male counterpart to Elizabeth Blanctorch, this French woman from KOF, and well, it's hard to disagree. The difference is that to me, Elizabeth looks a little more like a fighter. To begin with, she was a fighter, not a complete weapon user, as she used her riding crop not very extensively. Also, her clothes didn't look very bulky, and her pants, for example, were like jockey pants, so sport pants, therefore they are apt to a physical activity like fighting. Elizabeth's design was also a little more contemporary, and I mean the original design that went from KOF 11. Her redesign for KOF 13 was a little too much old-fashioned for me. And it is the one that looks more like Kuya, by the way. Of course, as Kuya is the guy that fights mainly with his sword, the clothes won't be much of a problem. But he still looks too hard to believe and too much different from the other characters from the game, as well as a big anime cliché. So is Kuya a good design or a cliché design? I used to think the latter until Kuya's biography was released. Kuya's background implies he is a Chinese man born in Macau, that region of China that was under Portugal's dominance for until 19th century or so. Therefore, its culture is marked by Western up to 19th century. I guess that sort of explains why Kuya is wearing this old-fashioned European uniform as a nod to that past of that region of China. I also think it's kind of interesting that they are adding characters from several different parts of China. For example, Shangwu is from the Yunnan region, which is a rural plateau, so he has this totem and the tribal designs. Lin is Taiwanese, which is a modern city, so she is kind of a valley girl. And now Mako with his big charge of history. Pretty interesting. So that whole part is enough to justify his presence and appearance. So it's more of a cultural thing, and I think culture is cool, so approved. And it made me learn a little more about China, by the way. Otherwise, his design is still a little hard to fit with the other characters of the game, but I thought with a concept like the one he has, there will be a way to make him fit perfectly. I'm excited for the alternate costume designs, to see if Kuya could mix better with the rest of the roster by sporting a different outfit. And now that we are done with the looks, let's go with the gameplay. Kuya's gameplay is not exactly surprising or endearing to the least, in fact it is kind of little orthodox. His gameplay is not modeled clearly after any other fighting game character, and aside from some little bits that remind me of Seal, he doesn't seem to play like any other fighter of the game. To begin with, his fighting style was a relief to me. I previously complained of the long reach a swordsman usually has compared to bare fist fighters. But in Kuya's case this is not much of a problem as he performs most of his normal moves with his hand, feet, the sheath of his sword or the back of the sword, and the drawn sword only in a few cases. I think this is more of a reference to the Yaido fighting style or its Chinese equivalent that emphasizes the surprise factor and has the swordsman using the actual edge of his sword only when completely necessary. But it also fears the character gentleman design and concept as he limits himself to non-lethal strikes until it's vital to draw his sword. And in that case, it's a perfectly executed idea. He even has some reversal moves, so his style is even more defensive and less offensive. So Kuya mostly uses his sword for special moves. And these specials are kind of weird and probably even random. Well, you got the Shoryuken, and later some run and slash attacks, but after that some ground level projectile as well as the variety of reversal moves. To be fair, at first sight none of these feels integral or realistic or anything, they just look like mostly like random special moves and his combos are kind of weird and very irregular. I mean, it's clear this character is not combo oriented, but you know, he can still work while being a different kind of character. He also has EX versions of his special moves in order to strengthen these other areas of opportunities. And you know, fighters with a unique style are still something very welcome. In fact, Kuya's gameplay has a couple great ideas like this faraway projectile that looks cool to continue with the combo after knocking an opponent away, and this EX reversal that stuns the opponent so much that practically gives you the chance to open for a combo in any way you can imagine. But I can't really give an opinion about him until seeing how good he is in the game, but so far I wouldn't doubt he could be one of the weakest, unfortunately. Let's see if I'm wrong. But well, about Kuya's visual aspect, I think his sprite looked good enough, in fact. The stance is fine and everything. I only have some gripes, for example, this pose during some of his supers that resembles closely Kazuki's stance from Samurai Shodown but looks kind of forced during the animation. His special effects, they are all discreet but actually cool and pleasant. My favorites are these leaves that fly after most of his attacks, especially during the shockwave of his EX reversal. Shoryuken has a cool golden particles effect too. The air projectile super, especially the max version, which by the way decomposes into 3 sound waves that fill the screen, looks neat. There's quite a bit of cliché too, to be honest, like the super that has him slashing while Chinese glyphs appear, and his reversal Heaven super that transports you to another dimension. But the animation is still elegant and cool looking at least. In general, Kuya is a nice looking character, discreet and elegant, although a little too old fashioned, like a true steward. But now let's get a little into Kuya's background. He was said in the beginning to be a servant of Jan's family and Jan's master, whatever it means. So I guess he is the one that taught Jan to... who knows? I don't think he taught Jan how to fight, as their fighting styles are completely different to each other, aside from the usage of EX moves. But maybe Kuya was a history teacher, an academic teacher. Maybe he taught Jan the history of EX moves or something like that. Whatever, I found a word for master could also be translated as steward, which is more or less a butler or majordom. In China, however, it seems the usage of that term mostly refers us to someone who administers the business of someone. In this case, I guess Kuya is Jan's guardian or someone that administers his fortune, so that will be basically it. Another thing I thought at first was Kuya is a weird name for a butler, but after a little research I found Kuya basically means big brother in Philippine language, and seeing the relationship between Portugal, Macau and the Philippines, as well as this character's relationship with Jan, it makes sense. But you would ask then, how is he his master, if they are basically the same age? Well, now, according to the story, Kuya is not as young as he looks. He is in fact even older than everyone else in the game apart from Ahmed and Legend. And well, that's very hard to believe. So, that felt really like this background was more of a pretext made on the fly to include this design in the game and relate him to another character, but it's hard to believe he is that old and Jan's teacher. Just a big stupid background, right? Well, it turned out, in fact, Macau is of every places in the world the one with the second highest health and life expectancy. Could Kuya's longevous looks be a nod to that fact? After learning about this and the history of Macau's region, I'm actually willing to give them the benefit of doubt. And so that's everything for the background, and hell, this guy managed to get away with everything this time. But let's go into this character's personality.
请赐教.
Kuya is a pretty serious and mature person. Pretty focused, silent, and kind of well-mannered. Not exactly the kind of person that calls for your attention. The fact he uses an extremely elegant, precise, and calm fighting style piles up with this idea. Sadly, and while he has some really fancy animation, this doesn't really add much charisma to the character, and combined with his color palette, which is pretty much grey enough, makes him hard to highlight. But I'm sure that was probably the idea. By the way, his voice is nothing special, in fact it is too similar to Ushi.
九尺清风，命中突袭，连斩。
There's really nothing to highlight here, but it's not bad either. Whatever, there's still some things to like about Kuya, for example the fact that he actually loves his master and hates seeing him struggling. So he's actually a great servant and a good person. Overall, Kuya is a fine character, although one not exactly designed to get for attention, with an interesting gameplay, which in the other side might end up not being that useful. While Kuya still doesn't completely fit in the game aesthetics, his design is pretty well executed and the interesting part of his background make him valuable for this game. And there's really not much more to say about Kuya. See you in the next round of Xuan character review, and thanks for watching.
就消失在这里吧。